The memory of that day will always be imprinted in my mind as long as I shall live. Watching my mum pack my life into our car and us starting on that journey to that house. It will never leave me. And it haunts me daily. I thought she loved me. So I couldn't understand how she could take me there. It didn't matter how hard I begged her though, or how much I screamed and cried that day.
I've told you before, you've got to go and live at your dad's.
I'll never forget the desperation of knowing I was losing her, despite me begging her over and over to keep me.
Believe me, I have no choice.
She'd made up her mind. And the terror I felt building inside me was too much to bear. As she started to drive me away from the life and love that I'd known, I desperately searched for clues in my little mind as to what I had done to deserve to be given away like that. I couldn't work out if I'd upset my mum or if I'd been a bad girl in some way and that was my punishment. It was dark and miserable that day and the clouds looked like they were as miserable and helpless as I was. But at least they were free. As memories came to my mind of all the happy moments I'd spent with my family, I scanned those scenes for clues to my wrongdoing. I was always a happy child, dancing and singing for everyone, always the entertainer. All I felt was love. I couldn't find one single moment where I'd not felt love. It was always laughter, and I was cherished beyond words. I never even heard a cross word from anyone before that day. I flitted through my happy childhood filled with magic moments and those I loved, and then found myself suddenly hurled back into reality as I realised I was being driven away from that safe and devoted world. I cried throughout the entire journey and didn't stop begging my mum to change her mind, desperate to do whatever it took to survive. Somehow, I knew there was terror looming, but I had no idea what. When she left me there, it took me several weeks to adjust to the house of hell. I learned quickly how to keep my head down, comply with the adults in the house, and be a good girl just to avoid punishment. All I had was my imagination, as my toys had been taken away as soon as I arrived. So drawing at first was my only way of losing myself in an imaginary world of safety again. The colour of my memories were happy times, so I'd spend hours creating pictures to immerse myself into that world whenever I could. It was all I had. I had no idea how those early weeks of separation would become years of utter hell. It was horrific and shocking. Try as I did to appease the adults, it became worse. No matter how good I was, it seemed to make it worse, and the adults would fight each other savagely for hours. So the torture of me listening to that was that I knew when it finished that it would be my turn. That first day she took me to school, all I knew was that she'd had enough of being beaten herself.
Come on, will you? I've got to drop you at school and leave the house before he finds out.
She was planning to go home and leave for her mother's. The story of Hansel and Gretel came to my mind that day. She had given me 17.5 pence and halfpenny pieces for my lunch money, so as I left the house of hell to go to my new school that day, I dropped a halfpence piece every so often as I thought I'd find my way home. But sadly, unlike the happily ever after in Hansel and Gretel, that day was the start of my realisation. Despite me crying out for help to the adults around me, no one was there to save me. He told me to never tell anyone our business ever again, and I never did. I didn't dare cross him from that day. He brought her home a few days later, and that's when the true horrors of my childhood began.